Welcome to another Campfire Session presented by Encamp. I am your host, Brandon Barlow. Today, we'll be discussing the state of recycling. We're going to look at things on a national level. We'll also dive into the state of Indiana, and then we'll even take a deeper dive and look at some numbers in Indianapolis. Our guest today is Allyson Mitchell. She is the Executive Director of the Indiana Recycling Coalition, or the IRC. Allyson, thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Brandon.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm really glad to be able to talk to you today. I know you just got done with Earth Day, and for you, it's more like Earth Month. I know you are busy, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at IRC?
Yeah, so I have been in the field of environmental sustainability my whole career, and I've been with the Indiana Recycling Coalition for just over 2 years now. So we're a statewide nonprofit organization that works to advance recycling and the circular economy across the whole state. So we're located in Indy, but we do work statewide.
Gotcha. So I noticed on your LinkedIn that you went to a couple Big Ten schools. You went to your undergrad at Purdue, then you went to Michigan, and moving on to getting your law degree. So I noticed one thing, that all that was about the environment. So when did you kind of know this is what you wanted to do as far as being in the environmental field?
So I think I knew it all along, but I didn't realize it until I was pursuing graduate schools and after Purdue, and I was applying to landscape architecture schools all across the country. And when I found the University of Michigan and their program, it was very much focused on natural resources and the environment. And that was a totally different perspective than most other schools across the country that were focused on architecture and design. And so when I first visited University of Michigan and got familiar with their program, it was like a homecoming. I was like, I had found my people, and something inside of me kind of awoke. And I had this really deep sense of I needed to go to school at the University of Michigan because of their focus on the environment. And during my 3 years in that program at University of Michigan, I really did deepen my understanding of my passion for the environment. So while I went there to get a degree in landscape architecture and ultimately did get that degree, I left with the sense that I needed to dedicate my career to environmental sustainability.
Absolutely. So as far as your role with the IRC specifically, when did recycling kind of become something, that's a passion of yours, or something you were always doing, or what did that look like?
So I've always been really interested in recycling. In fact, when I grew up in southeastern Indiana on a farm, I was begging my parents all the time to recycle and trying to, get them to be more conscious of our waste as a family. And so my career up until taking this position hadn't necessarily had a focus on recycling, but when this position became available and I was aware of the challenges around recycling, specifically in Indianapolis, through my involvement, having been a project manager in the City of Indianapolis's Office of Sustainability. During my time there, recycling was always a problem that needed to be solved.
Absolutely.
And so I was really aware that there were a lot of issues and barriers. And so when this position became available, I wanted to be the one to be a part of solving that. So I was really excited to, for the first time in my career, really dive deep into the issue of recycling and the circular economy. And there's no looking back for me. I'm all in, and I'm totally geeked out on this topic. And I've really enjoyed an opportunity to expand my expertise in sustainability, specifically through this role at the IRC.
That is good, because we definitely need you, as we'll kind of dive into that. I'm really excited for our listeners to kind of listen to you. I remember first time I heard you, I was with a young professionals group at a company, and you came in and we just grilled you with questions about recycling, how to do it, when to do it. And then we all left super inspired. So what is your mission for the IRC?
I'm glad to hear that you were inspired, because that's also it's a big part of my job, is kind of explaining to people how they've possibly been recycling incorrectly for a long time. So I'm glad that your impression of that was feeling inspired. The mission of the Indiana Recycling Coalition is to strengthen the circular economy in Indiana through waste reduction, reuse, recycling, and composting. So you can tell from our mission statement that we do much more than just recycling.
So you guys are membership based. How many members do you have? You know that offhand?
So right now we have about close to 300 members, and those are everyone from individual members to corporate members, institutions, state and local government. So we really have a whole different variety of membership types.
We will cover this a little bit more at the end. So if someone want an individual or a company wanted to get involved, what's the easiest way to do that?
So first thing I would tell people to do is to go to our website so you can learn a little bit more about us, and subscribe to our email newsletter, and then join, become a member. It's really easy. You can do it all online. And you can also follow us on social media to kind of stay up to date on all the things that we're doing.
Perfect. Okay, so let's kind of get away from that, kind of dive into the state of recycling in Indiana. So most people think about recycling on an individual level. You have your home, you have the hauler. So who else is involved in this? I think you used the word cycle. What was that you used?
Circular economy.
Circular economy. That is correct. Yes.
Yeah. So most people are, again, they're really familiar with who their hauler is at home or at work. And there's about 6 major haulers in the state of Indiana. But that's just the very beginning of the process. So some other folks that are involved are your materials processors, and those are the folks that after the material comes from your curb to a materials recovery facility and gets sorted, then it has to get processed. So that is another step. And there are many companies across the state, and that's their role, is to take those recycled commodity materials basically from your curb and turn them into a standardized material that can then become an input for the manufacturing process. So another player in this whole process are the manufacturers. They are the end markets that drive demand for recycled content material coming off of your curb. Also, there's the transportation, distribution, and logistics network folks. So this is your trucking companies. They are shipping these materials all over the state, and they're a critical part of it. And Indiana is really well positioned here because we are the crossroads of America. Other folks that are really engaged in this process are legislators and state agencies that set policies and then carry those policies out. So they play a critical role in the whole process for recycling. And then at the local level, you have solid waste management districts and municipalities that are another layer of that policy implementation. And then consumers, you and I, and your listeners, we are all part of the circular economy. The materials that we buy, the things we throw away, all of those choices are components of the circular economy and of the recycling industry in the state of Indiana. So we're all kind of cogs in a giant system. And the IRC feels that our role is to sort of be the grease in the middle of those cogs, helping the system operate efficiently, making sure everybody understands their role and how they can use their role to help maximize the efficiency and effectiveness of the whole process.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not just about the individual. There's a whole community. It needs to be buy-in from everyone. I think that's what you're really trying to say there. So one of the things I struggle with as an individual, and I know it seems like it's very easy, but I'm not sure sometimes what I can and even can't recycle. If I need resources, like what are the steps I should go through to kind of figure out, hey, is this something that I can recycle?
Yeah, so we always tell people the first place to start on figuring out what you can recycle is with your hauler or service provider. They are going to be they're the ones taking the material, so they're the best ones to tell you what they want and what they don't want. So go find out who your hauler is and go to their website or give them a call. Sometimes it's not always easy to put your finger on their website in terms of what they want, what they don't want. And sometimes the material that they provide on their website doesn't list every single thing that you're wondering about. And so we often get to, unfortunately, be the bearers of the bad news that if it's not on that list, the answer is no. It's not maybe, hopefully, the answer is no. So we help people understand what wish cycling is, and that is the act of, I want the thing is made out of plastic or it's made out of metal. I want it to be recycled. I want it to be recyclable. And therefore, I'm going to put it in my recycling bin and just cross my fingers and hope that it gets recycled. And that although that comes from a really good place, in most cases, people really want to do as much good as they can by recycling the highest quantity of materials. It's actually hurting the system. And so the best thing for people to do if they want to be a great recycler is to learn exactly what they can and cannot put in their recycling bin and then strictly adhere to that and help their family members do the same thing, which I can tell you is a challenge.
Oh, yes, it is. This is something I just thought about here. Is this something that changes seasons, change by year? Is there sometimes I can go there, hey, I can recycle this plastic, and then other times in the year, they're like, hey, we don't need this anymore? Is that possible?
So it doesn't really change significantly very often. So basically, you should check in maybe once a year. And it's pretty consistent across the state on most things that you can and can't recycle. And there are, of course, some exceptions. And some of those exceptions include things like cartons, where you might get chicken broth in a carton or soup, sometimes like almond milk and those types of things that are aseptic carton packaging, or even wine comes in cartons.
Yeah.
Those are only accepted by a few haulers. The majority of haulers don't accept those. So those are the kinds of things that you should know if your hauler accepts those or not.
I've always had kind of an issue or just not really knowing what to do. What are your thoughts on commingling of materials and recycling materials?
So what you're talking about is where you put all your recyclables together in one big bin. That's called commingling your recycling. And when recycling first got started in this country, you had 3 separate bins. And your glass and plastic, or I can't remember exactly how it was because I wasn't in this system. I was living in a rural area that didn't have this. But you had a bin for paper and newspapers. You had a bin for glass and for metals and plastics. And that was kind of a cumbersome system. It kept the materials clean, but it required the workers in the collection route to get off of the truck to lift these bins and put them into the designated compartments of the truck. Commingling, when we put everything in one big bin, and most times this is a roll-off cart similar to your trash container, an arm can come by attached to the truck, just like your trash truck. Pick it up and throw it in, and then it gets sorted back into those categories at the materials recovery facility. And so there's a lot of data to suggest that there's higher participation rates across the country when communities move from that segregated or separated system to a commingled system.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it easier. So people are more likely to participate in that program when they can just throw all the recyclables in one bin. It does require, it's a lot more effort and cost, frankly, to separate those materials again, back in the material recovery facility. But it also saves cost in terms of, the truck and the ability to move quicker through the route to pick up these materials. So there's a lot of pluses and minuses, but overall, commingled recycling is proven to be an effective strategy for curbside participation rates. The challenge is really on education so that people know what to put in and what not to put in, so that the cost to do the sorting at the materials recovery facility is minimal.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. I was under the thought that if we separate out, that it may be it's just a little easier. It just saves you a step, and I get that buy-in. Something that's a little bit easier for people to do, for a family to do. More people are just likely to do it. It makes total
Right.
sense.
Well, and the
So
quality of your materials as well, when you keep them separated, is typically much better. When you
yes,
commingle things, for example, your paper and fiber, if you have any type of liquid contaminants in your commingled recyclables, the paper and fiber in there are going to be, they're going to soak that up and they're going to be contaminated. So that is a trade-off as well. So again, that's where education comes in as so critical in a commingled recycling scenario. People need to understand what contamination is and how to avoid it, and how contamination can really sort of wreck the whole load if they aren't careful.
absolutely. Yeah. I've definitely had to stop my daughters. Hey, if you throw this in here now we have nothing to recycle. So we've kind of gone towards the dropping it off ourselves. It is an extra step, but it kind of takes out that commingling and contamination, especially when you have little ones in the house.
Yep.
So this is going to be a two-part question, also a big question. So what exactly can we recycle in Indiana? But what I'm really getting at is how consistent is that with the other 49 states?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's pretty consistent, honestly. And this is true before the China ban, which I know we'll get into that a little bit later, and after the China ban. And that is plastics, number one, and number two, that are bottles and jugs. That's universally accepted across the country. In some locations, they will, and this includes Indiana, it's very small number of places will take plastic number five. But generally, plastics 3 through 7 are not recyclable in your curbside bin. So that's a pretty good blanket rule. And if you can recycle plastic number 5, do so. But know that you're in the minority.
Do you have an example of a plastic 3 through 7? I'm having trouble kind of seeing what that, or conceptualizing what that is.
Yeah. So actually, I will have to plug, we did some plastics recycling videos as part of our Earth Month campaign that spoke about, we gave examples of all the 7 types of plastic and what they're commonly used to make, and then how what they can be used to make in recycled form. And that's what's kind of tricky, is that people say, what kind of types of plastic can be recycled? And it's kind of a two-part question. All types of plastic technically have some value to be recycled, but in your curbside bin, you can only do plastic bottles and jugs made from 1 and number 2 because they have the highest value. And that process is a cost intensive process. So it has to have value in order for it to be viable in that stream, essentially. So yeah, plastic number 3 is polyvinyl chloride, or PVC.
Okay.
So those are the pipes in your house. They be used to make yard signs, campaign signs that you see in your neighborhood a lot. Plastic number 4 is mostly flexible plastic packaging and film. So the stuff that gets wrapped around your toilet paper, that's plastic number 4. Plastic number 5 is, there's a lot of bottles and caps are made from plastic number 5. Number 6, let's see, what is number 6? Number 6 is, I believe, polystyrene. I should have my chart here in front of me because 7 numbers. 6 is polystyrene. So that is styrofoam, and polystyrene can actually be styrofoam. So it's that really fluffy stuff, or it can actually be used to make rigid things like Solo cups, things like that, drink cups. And then number 7 is like other, which is it's either some really obscure type of plastic, or it's multi-layers of different types of plastic. So it's mixed materials, essentially.
Good. I'm glad you went through that and you have all that offhand. That is wonderful, because I'm thinking like I think I might have made a mistake last week. It's that easy if you're not really aware of what you're doing.
It takes a lot of practice, quite honestly, and self-control to not over or wish cycle.
Yeah.
This is my job. I talk about recycling all day, and I still have to have an internal conversation with myself around clamshell containers for strawberries. We love strawberries in this household, so we're eating a lot of strawberries, and it breaks my heart and my husband's heart to have to put those in the trash can. They're plastic number one. We want them to be recycled, but it's not a bottle or a jug. So I feel you. It's hard, and you've got to constantly be reminding yourself and your household members what goes in that recycling bin and what doesn't.
Yeah, for sure. So if you don't come from a family or you don't not really into recycling, one of the first places that you might get introduced to it is at the workplace. So let's say you work at a job and you actually don't have recycling set up. What would be your best advice of how to start, and how do you advocate within?
Yeah. So I would suggest to first just be a little bit curious around your workplace, and you can do a little bit of internal information gathering. So you can just go look at your loading dock if you have a loading dock. That's usually where your dumpsters are located. What's the company that hauls your trash for your company? That's the best place to start. Now, you might be in a commercial office setting, and it's a property management company that does it. So it really depends on the type of location and relationship with property management, the types of waste streams your organization generates. But there are opportunities if you find out who your hauler is, and then talk with your superiors and inquire. Say, can we recycle? Do we currently recycle at all? Can we start with office paper? It's a high value material, or aluminum cans in the break room. If those just do a little bit of I would say digging, but I don't mean that in the physical sense, especially in these COVID-19 times. But just sort of observe the types of wastes that are being generated at your workplace. And if they're one of the four main commodities, and I'll add a fifth to that because food waste and organics is another material that can be recycled and is very valuable as a material to divert away from landfills or incinerators. So really just find out what your waste is and see if there's potential for holding some of that back, maybe even just a special collection of aluminum cans in the break room, or office paper collection at the printer, things like that. There's ways that even if you aren't able to have a dedicated recycling bin that is serviced by a hauler, you can potentially do some really great work by just encouraging other employees at your workplace to do, some collection at their desk or in certain designated areas, and do some drop-offs, on your lunch hour where there are locations near you to drop things off. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. It doesn't have to be a big, expensive endeavor to be a recycler in your workplace.
And one of the things we're in 2020 now, people are very aware, but usually it just takes a group of people or one person even to kind of start the process, and then everybody else just kind of falls in line as well.
Exactly. And I think that's the same approach could be used for thinking about the type of waste that's generated, and even before it becomes a waste, how can you minimize some of that waste? If you're doing, now, not a lot of this is happening in COVID times, but in normal times, if there are lunch meetings and there's catering that gets brought in, or pizza that gets brought in, or something, are there ways that you can minimize the amount of stuff brought in? Our office uses our own plates and flatware. We never use plastic flatware or cups. We don't have a dishwasher. We do them by hand. But there are different ways to really think about minimizing waste, and that's also a really good place to start.
Oh, before we dive into the next question, you brought up something that's a sticking point for me, and that's a pizza box. What can I do with my pizza box? What do I do?
Yeah, great question. This is a very popular question. So pizza boxes are recyclable, but there's a caveat.
Okay.
If it's greasy, don't put that in the recycling bin.
Right.
Now, sometimes the bottom is greasy and the top is not. tear off the top and put the top in your recycling bin and put the greasy bottom half in your trash can.
Yep,
So a
that makes
little
sense.
bit of grease is okay, but if it's pretty saturated in grease, don't put that in the recycling bin.
Okay. What about the thing in the middle? That the little divider separator from the top and the bottom box, so to make sure that the top box doesn't touch the pizza.
Oh, that little white.
Yeah, little plastic. No.
I know
Again,
you want. I know you want it to be recyclable. I do too.
I'm wish cycling it for sure. Okay. All right. Good to know. See, this is. I'm so glad I had you on today. This is a good reminder. I've already had the initial, and I forgot already that. Yes. Throw that out.
We're starting a support group for former wish cyclers.
There we go.
You can join.
Yes, I will definitely be a part of that. Okay. So one of the topics I wanted to make sure we touched on, and it's probably going to give raise some eyebrows, is the recycling rate here in Indiana, nationally, as well as Indianapolis. Can you kind of talk about where we are with all three of those?
Yeah, so I'll start with the state of recycling in Indiana. The state has been tracking, measuring, and publishing a recycling rate for the state of Indiana since 2015. And when they first did that, it was at about 11.7%. Now, as the years have gone by, we've gotten incrementally better, but also we suspect, and so does IDEM. IDEM is the one collecting this information and publishing this. They've gotten better at collecting data. So it's possible that we're getting better, but it's also quite possible that the data is getting better.
Fair.
So right now in the state of Indiana, the latest number that they've published was the 2018 state of recycling, and it was at 20%. So that is based on tonnages. So that is not about 1 in 5 people recycle. That's not what that's saying. It's tonnage based on total waste generated in the state. 20% is diverted from landfill or incineration.
So 20%, that is, I'll let you kind of dive into nationally, but that is well below the national average. Is the national average still around 30%, 34%, something like that?
Yep, it's hovered at 34% for many, many years. And recently, 2019, it ticked up to 35%.
Okay.
Nationally.
Which is really good, meaning that Indiana as a state has some work to do. Now, what are we looking at in the city of Indianapolis?
Brace yourself. So in Indianapolis, as you know, you can subscribe to curbside, but you have to opt into that system and you have to pay to do that. It's not automatically delivered to you as a service like your trash is. So in that scenario, you are going to expect a lower recycling rate, right? Because it's not forced upon you or it's not provided to you automatically. So about 10% of residents in Indianapolis subscribe to curbside recycling. And an unknown number, because this is really hard to track, use those public drop-off bins. So cumulatively, what that amounts to, from a tonnage perspective, is that it's about a 4% recycling rate in the city of Indianapolis. That's why I said brace yourself.
Allyson, I really want to unpack this. We're going to hold off here. We're going to go into another session. So, guys, thank you for listening. We're going to go into part 2 with Allyson. So stay tuned, and I'll see you later.